Does spending more money on your car's restoration ensure a better product? This is the great paradox of automotive restoration. If it costs more money to restore, it's going to be a better car, correct?
Of course.
Just like if you spend more money on a hamburger, it's going to taste better. Or you spend more money on a milkshake, it's going to be more delicious. Or if you spend more money on a pizza, you're going to enjoy it more and more after each slice rather than experiencing diminishing returns. Now, before I get into this video, I wanted to point out the same thing every other YouTube subscriber points out, that only 30% of my 30% of the people who watch these videos are actually subscribed to this channel. Let's try to break the YouTube average, please, because I might be average in other areas, but this is one area where I'd like to perform above average. So if I can just get a few more of you to subscribe, I would be very grateful. But anyway, I digress. The idea behind restoring a car is to make the car as good as possible. And there will be an article in the Star magazine about this, but there's an area in the article that I wanted to expand on a little bit. Most of the time we restore cars for 3 reasons. 1, the car is structurally compromised either from rust or an accident and needs to be restored. 2, the car is so inauthentic, it's so wildly incorrect that a total restoration is the only way to fix it. So a good example of this would be a 280 SE 3.5 Cabriolet that we had come in here after it was flooded in the last hurricane that hit the Gulf Coast. I can't remember what it was, but because we have so many of them nowadays. But the car got 4 feet of water in it. Already had a lot of rust. It was already a color changed car, so it was originally white and they had painted it silver. It had probably serious mechanical damage due to the intrusion of salt water, though I was not 100% sure. And last but not least, there were so many things done to this car that were not quite right and were sort of done halfway, that everything really needed to be done over again. And so we had looked at this car and said, this is a $125,000 restoration of a car that didn't even start life as a 280 SE 3.5 cab. It was originally a 6-cylinder high grill cab, and then it was taken to the factory and converted to a 3.5 specification. So I'm really not sure what happened there. But there were some wild theories, such as the car could be a prototype. I'm not sure. I don't think we got that lucky, you know. So a big problem with the last one, which is why people restore cars, is often because they think they can and they should. And what are the reasons they think they can and they should? Well, they're obsessive compulsive about the details in the car. Or they think that somehow the car needs to be linearly improved, and sometimes this is the restorer who thinks that they can do a better job than the factory, and so they talk the customer into the restoration. But the last one is because the person has some kind of weird competitive streak, and they think that when they take their car to a concourse, and we're really only talking about cars that are concourse worthy, okay? Like if you brought us a 280 SE sedan, and you say to me, I don't want this to be a show car. Well, yeah, you're damn right. It's not supposed to be. It's not going to be. It isn't. But we still want the car to work well and be authentic, because authenticity in our shop is, you know, it's like the 11th commandment, thou shalt keep thy car authentic. Because when a car is authentic, everything's easier to repair. The car is easier to maintain for the next 50 years. It is easier to order parts for it. It is easier to follow the factory maintenance and repair guidelines. When it's not authentic, suddenly everything becomes a very difficult process to follow, because it requires a weird mix of creativity and very good high-level problem-solving skills, as opposed to having the entire repair process outlined for you so you can actually keep enjoying the car. But going back to this whole question of, is it going to result in a better car if you spend more money on it? Let me try an example. Imagine that, now I used one example in my Star magazine article, but we're going to use another example. Imagine that customer A brings a 280 SE 3.5 coupe to a restoration shop, and customer B brings a 280 SE 6-cylinder high grille coupe to a restoration shop. Customer A's car, I think the best way you could describe this is that it needs everything. It needs paint, it needs leather, it needs wood, it needs an engine rebuild, but it's been sitting out in the Arizona sun for the last, like, I don't know, 20 years, just baking to death. And then customer B's car does run, it is functional, but there are some problems. It has significant floor rust that wasn't fixed right. It has a cheap paint job that's not quite in the right color. It has pervasive issues, think like a rotten exhaust, numerous wiring harness repairs, a worn out steering box, cloudy instruments, an incorrect radio, and the dash has been cut too big in that spot. Broken heater levers, a blocked off heater core, malfunctioning power windows, a sunroof that's not operational, and a kinked sunroof cable tube, a bad headliner. I mean, all these little issues go on and on and on. And many of you know what I'm talking about. They're called pervasive general faults. They're everywhere in the car. You can't look at a single item in the car and not find a flaw in it. And this is one of those situations where the 280 SE 3.5 coupe has similar problems, but let's add a variable. It simply hasn't been touched. It was just parked that way. It wasn't a nice car when it was parked. It was worn out. It didn't run well. The engine had problems, but they parked it. They didn't cut a big hole in the dash. The car just sat out in the desert and sort of rotted. Now, the flaw here is this. Many customers assume that because the car shows up running, it's going to be an easier restoration project, and that's not really true. The area where the low grill 6-cylinder 280 SE that we used it as an example is going to consume more resources is because the restorer, which is sometimes me, will often assume that because the car is an operational car, certain areas of the car don't need to be touched or serviced or restored. Whereas on the 3.5, somebody's going to look at it and say, okay, we need to estimate a restoration for this entire car. Everything needs to be gone through. The 280 SE low grill coupe ends up becoming a bigger project because I guarantee that some people will go back and revise problems in the car over and over and over again. They'll have to charge the customer for it. It'll also be a huge drain on shop resources. And trust me, you can charge the customer and you can still have to go do a lot of work for free. So both of you end up losing. And oftentimes, because the customer has a delusional thought that because the car runs, it'll be an easy project, it ends up taking longer because you have to convince the customer, hey, this is bad, that's bad. Oh, by the way, your running engine still needs to be rebuilt. It still has a worn bottom end. So I want to be extremely clear about this. One of the worst things that you can possibly do on any restoration is assume that it's going to be cheap and easy. You always must assume that everything's going to be as difficult as possible. Now with the 280 SE 3.5 that's been parked out in the desert, it's easier to assume that everything's going to be as difficult as possible because the car looks like a major project, and indeed it is a major project. The problem with the running driving car is it looks like not a major project, when in reality it's just had bad repair after bad repair after bad repair that's resulted in the car staying on the road, maybe continuing to run and drive, but also not being really up to any sort of standard. It might run, but you can't drive it 20 miles. It might keep water out of the roof and the windshield, but it won't keep your wallet in the floor. It might, you know, might have two doors that close, but they have really bad air gaps because the car was wrecked, and you're going to have to put in a Select jig to get those door gaps right because 40 years ago, the car was hit in the side by a truck and someone decided to fix it as best they could without using factory equipment. Now, where does this sort of thing leave us? Well, The customer who has the 280 SE low grill car is going to assume that because more money was spent in the car, that it's going to be a better car than the 280 SE 3.5. Now that still could be possible because of the skill of the restoration shop and their hourly rate, but it's probably not going to be the outcome. The outcome is that the car that is whose restoration is planned better and is a more straightforward project is usually going to end up being the easier car to restore that has a lower budget and therefore a better result. But the customer often thinks the opposite. They think that because you spent more money on it, it's just automatically going to be better. The truth is, in the automotive restoration world, the cars that soak up more money and more resources compared to similar cars. I'm not saying we need to compare a 356 to a Lamborghini Miura or something. I'm saying we need to compare two 300 SLs or two 280 SLs or a 230 SL and a 250 SL. The car that soaks up more dollars and cents is often never going to be as good as the car that required less work to restore. Because, going back to original example, the 280 SE 3.5 that was sitting out in the desert may not have significant body rot. Its dash may have not been cut for a big radio. Sure, the seat frames are, rusty, but some sandblasting and you get to build them up with new material. Maybe the car, doesn't have great paint and body finishes, but at least it didn't have a major accident that has to be corrected. This is what I'm talking about. It's better to start with a car that has good bones. Now, the equivalent of this in my shop, because I don't really do restorations, is somebody brings me two 450 SLs, one that's been used hard and put away wet, but is still kind of running and driving, versus a car that's been locked up in storage for 25 years. Somebody assumes the car, because the car's just been stored and not running, that it's a worse car because it was stored and not running for a long time. But I'd rather get the untouched virgin car than get the car that has been cobbled together to stay on the road. Getting the car back in the shop that's been cobbled together to stay on the road is going to yield infinite surprises. Now, sometimes cars like this were cobbled together to be kept on the road and then they were parked for long periods of time. You still try to see the best in the situation, but an original car that was parked due to a death in the family or somebody just losing interest in it, which does happen because keeping an older car on the road is a lot of work, is still a better scenario than trying to restore, let's say, a crashed car that was repaired badly. Anyway, I hope you guys understand what I'm saying here. Try to think about this concept before you delve into the restoration of any older car, not just a Mercedes. And we'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you for liking and subscribing our videos, and please try to watch the whole thing through. I promise that the ends are not as boring as you might think. See you later.